Have you ever been frustrated at someone, genuinely frustrated, certain they were being unreasonable, and then found out what was actually going on in their life? And felt the frustration immediately dissolve into something more like, oh, that's what they were dealing with. That's what it looked like from where they were standing. If I had been in their position, I might have done exactly the same thing. Korean wisdom has 4 characters for the practice that prevents that specific, from arriving too late. 역지사지, 역지사지, change positions. Think from there. Welcome back to K-Wisdom, where 4 characters hold thousands of years of Korean wisdom. Today, 역지사지, and a surprising fact about this idiom that almost nobody knows. Let's start with the 4 characters. 역, to change, to exchange, to swap. 지, ground, place, position, where you are standing. seesaw, to think, to reflect, to consider. 지, it, that, pointing towards something. idioms, change position, think from there. 4 characters. A direction of movement, not physical movement, but the movement of perspective. The deliberate act of stepping out of where you are standing and into where someone else is standing and thinking from there. Here is something almost nobody knows about 역지사지. It doesn't exist in Chinese. Not in Chinese dictionaries. Not in standard Chinese usage. The 4 characters idioms in that specific combination, with that specific meaning, developed in Korea. It is a Korean idiom that grew from a Chinese root. That root is yojijugayan yidazagia, ran from the Mencius. A phrase that means, if positions were exchanged, they would all do the same. Mencius used it to describe the great sage kings of ancient China, Yu, who treated every person who drowned as if he had personally failed to prevent their drowning. Hou Ji, who treated every person who went hungry as if he had personally failed to provide for them. Mencius's point was about the universality of genuine virtue. If you truly understand someone else's position, you will naturally respond to it the way they do. But Korean thought took this idea and turned it into a practice. Not, if positions were exchanged, but exchange them, deliberately. Now, think from there. 역지사지, the Korean evolution of an ancient Chinese idea into a daily act. The story behind 역지사지 begins with 2 of China's most celebrated sage kings. Yu was the hero of the Great Flood. He spent 13 years controlling the waters that were devastating ancient China. 13 years away from home. He passed his own house 3 times during that period and did not go in. Not because he was heroic in a dramatic sense, but because every person who was drowning in the flood felt, to him, like someone he was personally failing. He had taken their position into himself. Their suffering was his. He could not rest until it was addressed. Yu Hou Ji was the Minister of Agriculture. And every person who went hungry felt to him like a person he had personally failed to feed. Mencius's point about these 2 men was this: they had genuinely exchanged positions with the people they served. Not as a philosophical exercise. As a lived reality. They had made other people's situations their own. yidazagia ran. If you truly exchange positions, if you genuinely stand where they stand, you will naturally do what they do. 역지사지, make it a practice. 역지사지 is not sympathy. Sympathy is feeling something about another person's situation from your own position. Feeling sorry, feeling moved, feeling glad it is not you. 역지사지 is perspective taking. It is the deliberate act of moving your thinking into another person's position, their actual circumstances, their constraints, their history, what they know and don't know, what they are afraid of and what they need, and thinking from there. Not how does this look from where I am, but how does this look from where they are? The answer is often startlingly different. What looks like rudeness from your position can look like exhaustion from theirs. What looks like stubbornness from where you are standing can look like a reasonable response to a history you don't know about from where they are standing. What looks like indifference to you can be someone managing more than you can see. 역지사지, change position, think from there, and then see if your conclusion about the situation survives the view from the other side. Most people discover the value of 역지사지 through its absence. Through the, moment. The moment you find out what was actually going on in someone's life when you were frustrated at them and feel your frustration instantly dissolve into understanding. Into something like, of course. Of course they responded that way. Of course that's how it looked from where they were standing. The, moment is usually too late. The frustration has already done its damage. The words were already said. The relationship has already absorbed whatever friction the misunderstanding created. 역지사지 is the practice that brings the, moment earlier. Not after you find out what they were dealing with. Before, as a deliberate act of wondering what might be going on for this person that I don't know about. How might this situation look different from where they are standing? You will not always get it right. You will not always fully understand a position you have never been in. But the genuine attempt to step into someone else's view before judging from your own produces something that the automatic default view almost never does. Generosity. The benefit of the doubt. Room for other explanations. Yoji-saji sounds simple. It is not. Genuinely stepping into another person's position, not just intellectually but emotionally, imaginatively, with your full attention, requires something that goes against several natural tendencies. It requires suspending your own immediate reaction. Your frustration, your hurt, your judgment about what they should have done. These are loud. They fill the available space. Yoji-saji asks you to quiet them enough to hear the other view. It requires genuine curiosity about something you might not find flattering. Because sometimes the view from the other position reveals that you contributed to the problem. That what felt like their unreasonableness was in part a reasonable response to something you did. And it requires imagination. You have not been in their exact position. You are constructing their view from the outside, which is imperfect at best. Yoji-saji does not promise perfect understanding. It promises the attempt. And the attempt made genuinely, with the real intention of seeing from the other side, is almost always better than not attempting at all. Yoji-saji is everywhere in daily life, in every moment where you have a choice between judging from your own position and wondering from theirs. The friend who cancelled plans last minute. From your position, inconsiderate, frustrating, a pattern. From theirs, possibly the third crisis this week, a day that went completely sideways, a decision they made because they had nothing left. The driver who is going too slowly in front of you. From your position, oblivious, annoying, why? From theirs, possibly lost, possibly anxious, possibly carrying something in the back seat that requires careful handling. The colleague who responded defensively to a reasonable request. From your position, difficult, unreasonable, unnecessarily hostile. From theirs, possibly the fifth time this week someone has questioned their work, possibly carrying context about this particular issue that you don't have. Yoji-saji doesn't require you to always excuse. It requires you to always wonder. And wondering genuinely, before concluding, produces a different quality of response than the automatic default of judging from your own position. Mencius's original point in Yoji Jugeyon was about virtue. He was saying the great sage kings were great not because they were naturally superior beings. They were great because they had genuinely internalized other people's positions. They had made other people's suffering their own. And once you have done that, once you have truly stood where someone else stands, the response comes naturally. You don't have to force yourself to help someone who is drowning if you feel they're drowning as if it were your own. You don't have to motivate yourself to address someone's hunger if you experience their hunger as a failure that belongs to you. Yoji-saji, the insight that virtue and perspective are not separate things. That the person who truly sees from another's position will naturally treat them well, not because they are following a rule, but because the other person's reality has become real to them. This is the deepest version of Yoji-saji. Not a technique for managing relationships. A practice of genuinely expanding whose reality you treat as real. Yoji-saji is not the same as agreeing with everyone. It is not the practice of abandoning your own view every time you understand someone else's. You can fully understand why someone sees something the way they do, can genuinely step into their position and see the logic from there, and still reach a different conclusion when you step back to your own. What changes is not the conclusion. What changes is how you hold it. Understanding someone's position changes the quality of how you disagree with them. It removes the dismissiveness, the assumption that they are simply wrong or unreasonable or not thinking clearly. It replaces that with something more honest. We have looked at this from different positions and reached different conclusions, and both conclusions make sense from where they are being reached. Yoji-saji produces disagreements that are productive rather than destructive. Where understanding is present even when agreement is not. Where the relationship survives the difference. Yoji-saji is deeply embedded in Korean relational culture. Korea places enormous value on understanding context, on reading situations carefully, on the specific skill called nunchi, the ability to sense what is happening in a room without being told directly. What people are feeling, what they need, what the dynamic is. Yoji-saji is the complement to nunchi. Where nunchi is the skill of reading a situation, Yoji-saji is the practice of deliberately occupying another's position, not just reading the surface but actively inhabiting their perspective. Together, they describe a relational ideal that Korean culture has long valued: the person who understands not just what is said but what is carried. Who responds not just to behavior but to the situation that produced the behavior. This is why Yoji-saji developed in Korea rather than remaining as the more passive Yoji Jugeyon. Korean relational culture needed a 4-character idiom for the active, deliberate practice of perspective exchange. And so it made one. Yoji-saji as a practice is simpler than it sounds as a philosophy. It is one question, asked before responding. How does this look from where they are standing? Not how should it look to a reasonable person. Not how does it look to me. But how does this particular situation, with this particular history, carrying this particular weight, look to the specific person I am dealing with right now? You will not always know the answer. You will often be guessing. You will sometimes get it wrong. But the act of asking the deliberate pause to wonder about the other view before reacting from your own changes the quality of what comes next. It slows the automatic response just enough to allow a considered one. It brings the, oh, moment earlier. It produces the kind of interaction where the other person feels understood or at least feels that genuine effort toward understanding was made rather than simply judged. 역지사지, one question, before every response that matters. How does this look from where they are standing? 역지사지 has been part of Korean language and culture for centuries. It grew from Mencius's 역지사지, the observation that genuinely virtuous people naturally share each other's positions. Korean thought took that observation and transformed it into an imperative. Not, they would all do the same if positions were exchanged. But exchange them, think from there, make it a practice. And that four-character phrase, which does not appear in Chinese dictionaries, which was formed in Korea from Chinese roots, became one of the most commonly used idioms in Korean daily life. Because Korean culture recognized something that Mencius had pointed toward but not quite formulated. Understanding is not something that happens automatically when you are good enough. It is something you practice. Deliberately, every day, in every significant interaction where your view and someone else's view are different. 역지사지, change position. Think from there, made in Korea, still needed everywhere. 역지사지 leaves us with one question about every relationship and every friction in our lives. How does this look from where they are standing? Not from where you are standing. Not from where a neutral observer would stand. From the specific person you are thinking about with their history, their fears, their constraints, their incomplete information, their entirely reasonable interpretation of events that looks nothing like yours. Stand there, think from there, and then see what changes. Maybe nothing changes. Maybe your original assessment survives the view from the other side. That happens. But often, more often than we expect, something shifts. The automatic certainty softens. The frustration becomes more complicated. The judgment becomes more provisional. And the interaction that follows is different, warmer, more accurate, more likely to produce something good than it would have been without that question. 역지사지, the practice of bringing the, oh, moment earlier. That is 역지사지, change position. Think from there. Born as 역지사지 in Mencius's philosophy, the observation that truly virtuous people naturally share each other's positions. Developed in Korea into a four-character practice of deliberate perspective exchange. Used today in every moment where someone chooses to wonder before they judge. Not a difficult philosophy. One question, asked before reacting. How does this look from where they are standing? And the specific shift that question produces from automatic judgment to genuine wondering is one of the smallest and most consequential things a person can practice. Because the people who ask it, who genuinely, regularly, imperfectly attempt to step into the positions of the people around them before concluding from their own, tend to inhabit a different quality of relationship than those who don't. Not perfect relationships, not relationships without conflict, but relationships where understanding has been attempted, where the other person feels that their position was considered, where the, oh, moment comes early enough to do something with. 역지사지, change position. Think from there. So here are your questions for today. Think about someone in your life right now, someone whose behavior has frustrated or confused you. 역지사지, change position. Think from there. How does your recent interaction look from where they are standing? What might they be carrying that you don't know about? What history or fear or constraint might be making their response make sense in a way it doesn't from your current view? And is there something in your own behavior toward them that looks different from their side than it does from yours? You don't have to fully understand. You just have to genuinely wonder. Tell us in the comments. Because 역지사지 moments, the times we genuinely stepped into someone else's view, are some of the most important ones we have. And sometimes the most transformative ones too. Thank you for watching K-Wisdom, where four characters hold thousands of years of Korean wisdom. If this stayed with you, if you are thinking about someone's position right now, please like and subscribe. There are many more four characters waiting. See you next time on K-Wisdom.